Good morning. This is week 3 of painting landscapes, and I would just like to say well done for the last 2 weeks. I received some really good and interesting snow scenes from you, and I really enjoyed seeing them. Thank you. This week I'm going to paint a Broadlands scene from a photo I took on a walk on Boxing Day. It was a lovely sunny day with a bright and interesting sky, which created lovely reflections in the water. So let's see how we get on with painting a nice Norfolk sky and some nice reflections in water this week. These are the sky colours that I use pretty often, not always, and I don't always use them all. Today, the subject I'm using is this, but probably a little bit more sky. But it's a lovely bright sky, and sometimes I put a little haze of raw sienna on the horizon line, but I don't think I'm going to do that today, so I may not be using the raw sienna, but I think the other colours will definitely be used. Okay. So those are there for you to see. And I haven't, in fact, done very much drawing at all because I don't really feel that this particular painting is going to need a lot of drawing. I have actually just very lightly sketched in a mill, which, let me show you, is in fact here. But to give some balance to my picture, I'm actually moving it over to this side, and that's the only thing I've drawn. But I have actually popped some tape across to create my horizon line, making sure that it isn't halfway exactly down the page, whereby I would be cutting my picture completely in half, and that doesn't look good. So I'm doing this. This is going to be the horizon where the sky actually finishes, and then I'm going to paint the water under that. Right, so let's make a start by completely wetting my sky area. There's lots of clouds in this sky. Try not to use a particularly strong masking tape if you actually tape across your page, because it is possible to actually tear your paper, depending on how good your paper is, with the masking when you remove it. But to take a little bit of the sticky off would be always a good idea before taping it across. But what you do have to do is to measure to make sure. I haven't drawn a line across. I've just made marks at either end and then popped the masking tape across. So you do need to use your ruler to make sure that you get that horizon level. Water is always very level, and it looks wrong if it turns out to be otherwise. Right, I'm tipping just to see if I've completely wet everywhere. And I've mixed up my ultramarine blue, which I'm going to load my brush with. Lots of cloud in this sky, but I've also taken another photograph of the sky, which I've got beside me, just to help me to remember what was going on above that low cloud that I can see in the picture. And there was just lovely blue sky that day. But then the clouds are going to start appearing any minute now. So you can leave unpainted areas for sky, for clouds in your sky, making sure that it stays nice and deep towards the top, because that's above your head, and nice narrow looking clouds at the top of your page, but in fact appearing larger towards the horizon. That's going to help with perspective in your sky. Okay. Really was a very blue day. Keeping it lighter here because I actually want to put some distant foliage in there. Right, so it's still very wet, so at this point have a look and see what you need to change, if anything. You can use another dry brush to actually create some more light and to get rid of any fuzziness that you don't like the look of. Or in fact you can use a tissue. Just to get some nice shapes into the cloudy area. You just have to be careful not to create sharp edges with your tissue. If you need to fold it so that it's nice and soft. If you're going to do lifting out, I think that's okay. But I do want to just lift a little bit of a streak through here, which I can see in my sky. And then with my alizarin and the Payne's Grey mixture, create a little bit of shadow underneath my clouds and going through while it's still wet. If you do this when it's dry or drying, getting too dry, you're going to get marks that you don't need. Hard lines, hard-edged marks. So while it's still damp, it's going to continue to move and make nice shapes for you in your clouds. You don't see shadows in your clouds over the top. They'll always be underneath your clouds. It's a little greyer here. So that's adding some interest into my sky. Softening the edges with that. And touching as little as I possibly can and using clean water to do so if necessary. I think that's looking okay. I don't think we've had such a nice day since then. It really was a lovely day for a walk. So if you actually have a photo of your own that you could find that was taken by you on a nice day with a good sky, try to use something like that, because it's good to have the memory as well as the actual photograph in front of you. It's always better if it's yours, but I will be attaching this just in case you haven't got a nice photo to use or can't find what you want on Pixabay. So you can then use mine. Right, while this is still damp, I'm going to actually pop in a little bit of the foliage that's out in the distance there. And I'm using some sepia and some raw umber. It's very it's a warm brown that I can see in a lot of the foliage in the distance, but keeping it actually really, really small and insignificant. And don't worry about going on to the masking, that doesn't matter. But this is going to create distance here. If it's too detailed, too large, it will just come forward and take away your lovely distance that you're creating here. A little bit of warmth in this, I think. Some Peroline violet there I'm just adding in. Just distant trees and hedges. Can't really see very well, which is a good thing, because if you can't see it, then you don't start, the brain doesn't take over and you start putting in things that you think you can see. Right. Right, this end has got a little tree that's a little bit higher than the rest, so a little bit of interest going in here. Which will break the monotony. So here and there you can just sort of put a little bit more depth in and a little bit more interest. Another tree here. But not at all significant. It's not detailed in any way. But nice to do this while it's still damp, and then it sort of fades and looks distant. I'm not going to put my windmill in until the end, because it's still too damp and that's got to look a little bit more shapely. It's not so forgiving as the foliage. Okay. So I'm going to stop, dry this off, and then I can remove my tape. Right, my sky is now dry and it seems to have dried up reasonably well. You can never really hope to create a sky that looks exactly like the one that you're looking at or in your photo. So just use it as a guide as to the sort of day you want it to be and the way you want your sky to look. So I can remove that now. And now I have to, I think, pop the water in next, because that's the next lightest area, I think, and I may take it all the way up there to the horizon line and put the reeds in afterwards. Okay, so similar idea. I don't always wet the water, but I think I'm going to on this occasion, because it's a very soft reflection that I can see there. But I'm going to keep it nice and light towards the edge of the horizon there, because I need to leave space to work over the top for the reeds. So the water is going to reflect more or less exactly what you see in the sky, And depending on how still the water is as to how perfect the reflection is going to be. I never like to really actually see a complete mirror image because then it stops looking like water. The water was quite still, but I can see some ripples in it, so I'm going to have to try to portray that. And leave lovely white paper, always. I'm going to soften my sky colour a little bit more with water so that it isn't actually going to be quite as strong as the sky colour. Much lighter tone, which is what I see. Right, so I'm leaving white paper and creating the lovely light reflections into the water that I see from the sky area. Leaving a little bit of gap at the top there for the reeds. While it's wet, it's going to soften really nicely in the water. There's my flat brush gone, which is so to get lovely watery ripply shapes, it's quite a good idea to get that flat brush out, and I'm reflecting some of these nice pinky colours also into the water here. Darker patch here, because it is reflecting down more or less what you're seeing up there, but it does move around a little bit more than you might expect, so it won't be completely in the place where you might suppose it would be, which is actually helpful in a way, because then you don't have to concentrate too hard on copying. In this corner I've got lots of reeds, so I can just wash in my watery mix. Gets a bit lighter here again. Always remember that your colour is going to dry up 3 times lighter than when you apply it. Right, so I need to create a few more ripples, I think. There's some nice colour up here. Again, I'm only using my photograph as for inspiration and a guide. I'm not trying to copy it exactly. It takes all the fun out trying to do that, and it means that I'm working not entirely with my head but with my heart as well, and feeling the way I feel my picture should go. But lovely light water. I think it's very pretty. My paper is crinkling, although I've taped it down. It's a block, which doesn't work quite as well as stretching onto a board, but it works well enough, and it will flatten out as it dries anyway. But always put a bit of extra tape around the edge, which leaves you a nice edge, but at the same time helps to keep your paper straight. While my water area is still, well, it's not very damp now, actually it's drying up a bit. So I'm actually just going to dampen this bit in the corner here, because that's got some reeds growing into the water, and I don't want those to look too strong, so I'm going to actually just pop a bit of that in now. This is burnt sienna, and quite the right colour for those reeds as far as I can see. There's also some warmth in them. So I've got some Perulian violet out, which I think will look nice over the top of that. Just for a little bit of depth there, and a little bit of interest in the corner where there are some reeds growing in the water there. When it's dry, I'll put a few stronger ones in, but at the same time it's reflecting down a little bit, some of which is going to be covered up with some taller reeds from the front. It's nice working on wet paper because you do get this lovely blending. Right, so that's quite pretty. A little bit of interest there. Okay, so now I'm going to pop in the reeds that I see in the distance, okay? And again, I'm going to use the burnt sienna. And I've got my little foliage brush here, which is all spiky and overworked, but it works very well. Putting a little bit of that was a bit strong, so I'm actually going to use some of the blue to put in a little bit of depth on the top here. It goes all the way along and then it's reflected down. So you don't need to keep that too level, but fairly level, I think. Because the reeds are not growing in a very straight line. Definitely got some darks and lights in there. So as it's drying, you can pop those in. The guy who lives down the road from me goes out in his little boat to collect these reeds for the thatchers. Right. I'm going to dry that off because I've got to put some nice reflection back down into the water of those reeds, and I just want that to dry first. Okay, so I've dried off the area that I've popped in those, where I've popped in the reeds. I just need to actually just reflect that down now into the water, which needs to be level. So I've popped a bit of tape back over to keep me nice and level with that water level underneath. It's not that much reflection showing, but there is some. While the reflection isn't going to be level, the level of the water needs to be. So this looks like a fairly simple subject, and I do like a simple landscape, but actually they're never quite as simple as you think they're going to be, so they can get a little complicated, but keep it simple as you can. Okay. And don't be afraid to leave things out that you feel are not going to enhance your picture at all. And put things in that you feel might help. Okay, so I can remove that now. And put a few little darks in here and there. It's always the darks that are going to help with your pictures. Good. Right, now we're going to get into the fun bit. We've got some lovely reeds showing here, which we now need to pop into our pictures. So the sword brush is the thing to use, I think, for that, and a variety of different colours. So don't be afraid to go for it. They've got to be nice and tall. And fill in your corner here nicely. Not all going in the same direction. I'm using some Perylene Violet as well, because some of them have got lovely warm colours, so use some of the colours that you've been using already in your picture. The burnt sienna, Perylene Violet. You could even use the ultramarine blue mixed with the burnt sienna to make a lovely brown. actually gets very busy in the corner. So let's use this little brush again to create some depth in this corner here. And some more burnt sienna out. So we're bringing the nice colours down we already have used in our picture, but also remembering that we must put some darks in here. You can slow down and take your time over things like this. I don't have quite so much time. But I'm actually going to stop for a minute and do a bit more. I've painted in lots more reeds and could go even further with those, but we'll leave it at that for now, apart from putting some more detail into them. But I just want to paint my little windmill that's in the distance there, so I've got a smaller brush out for that, and it's not going to look very significant at all because it's very, very distant. Perhaps the sword brush just to indicate some sails, which you can't see terribly well from here, but just breaking up the skyline there. And it's got a darker side, and it's coming down a bit lower than the foliage it's in front. So that's really all I need for that. That's a little point of interest. Now it would be nice, I think, to actually take some time over creating some nice leafy bits on the top of the reeds. So again, I've got my little scrubbing brush out, and I can use that working in different directions with it, but it actually does make quite nice marks without getting too detailed. Because you can't see any of it particularly well. But again, use all the lovely darks and lights and the different colours that you've been using in your picture so far. You can spend quite a lot of time creating little leaf shapes. Letting the brush do the work for you. And then the reeds are going to be a real point of interest. But you can look through the reeds, you can look past the reeds to the horizon, which is making it an more interesting picture. So as much or as little as you want to. I hope you can find a nice picture that's got some water and reflections. But as I said, if not, use this one. So I'll leave it at that and carry on with this work, and you'll see what it's like. You'll see the finished article when I attach it for you. But I think that's all I need to really show you for the moment. I do really need to put more reeds in. As you can see, it's very full. But I need to take time over that, and so not a good idea to hurry that. So that's that. But I did one other, slightly more challenging one perhaps, but again it was taken on the same day and the sky was looking a little bit different further along. And I put some a windmill again, which I could see, and a few birds in the sky. You could always, with the one that I've just been demonstrating, I could always put a duck or two on the water, maybe distant, just, you know, very likely. I'll think about that. But you have to be careful not to make your pictures look too contrived by doing something like that, so be careful. And I'll attach the photograph of this one as well, so you could use that if you prefer to do something a little bit more challenging. Okay, but some water, sky and reflections this week if you could. And I'll look forward to seeing those. Next week I'm going to paint another scene, including a building or some buildings. Okay, take care, and I think in the meantime we may get some snow, let's hope. All right then, take care, bye-bye.